The lunch rush at Foster's Family Diner froze mid-bite. Forks stopped halfway to open mouths. A toddler twisted around in a high chair to stare. Because a young police officer was marching a calm, silver-bearded black man toward the front door in handcuffs. One gloved hand clamped on the back of his plain navy polo, steering him past table after table like a shoplifter caught on camera. The man did not struggle. He did not raise his voice. He kept his eyes forward and let it happen. Behind the register, Dale Foster crossed his arms and let a small, satisfied smirk settle onto his face, certain he had finally cleared the drifter out of his dining room. What Dale did not know, what the officer clamping the cuffs did not know either, was that the quiet man being walked out of that diner had arrived 90 minutes earlier, carrying the legal authority to shut the entire restaurant down with a single signature. And his tablet, lying screen up on the floor under a stainless prep table in the kitchen, had already recorded every single reason to do it. Before we find out who the man in the handcuffs really was, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's dive back into the story. 90 minutes earlier, the morning had been perfectly ordinary. At 11:15 a.m., a dusty gray county sedan pulled into the cracked asphalt lot of Foster's Family Diner, a squat brick building on a commercial strip between a tire shop and a shuttered video store. The lunch crowd was just starting to build. Through the wide front windows, booths were filling with construction crews, retirees nursing bottomless coffees, and a couple of young mothers wrangling kids. Elijah Carter shut off the engine and sat for a moment, reading a file on the tablet mounted to his dash. Elijah was 54 years old, a broad-shouldered black man with a neatly trimmed gray-flecked beard and the unhurried stillness of a person who had spent 30 years walking into rooms where he was not expected. He wore a plain navy polo, khaki work pants, and a pair of scuffed leather boots worn soft at the toes. There was nothing about the way he was dressed that announced who he was. That was deliberate. Elijah had learned a long time ago that the truest picture of a kitchen was the one you saw before anyone had time to clean up for you. Because Elijah Carter was not a drifter, and he was not a customer. He was the director of the County Environmental Health Division, the man whose office licensed, inspected, and, when necessary, closed every food establishment in the county. He oversaw 40 inspectors and a budget that touched every restaurant, school cafeteria, and hospital kitchen for 200,000 people. His signature at the bottom of a form could padlock a business by dinner time. And still, every few weeks, Elijah did something most directors had stopped doing years ago. He went out into the field himself. He grabbed a tablet and a calibrated thermometer, and he did the unannounced routine inspections nobody at his pay grade was expected to do anymore. He did it because he had started as a 24-year-old line inspector, and he had never forgotten that the people who got sick from a cold walk-in cooler or a filthy hand sink were never the owners. They were kids and grandparents and folks just trying to eat lunch. Foster's Family Diner was on his list for a simple reason. It had 2 open complaints in the county system, 1 customer report of illness after a meal the month before, and 1 anonymous tip flagging the walk-in cooler. 2 complaints on the same establishment moved it to the front of the line. Elijah gathered his equipment with the calm economy of long habit. A ruggedized inspection tablet, its screen already open to the establishment's file and inspection checklist. A digital probe thermometer, freshly calibrated in ice water that morning, clipped to his shirt pocket like a pen. And a worn black leather credential holder, holding a laminated county identification card and a small embossed inspector's shield. He stepped out into the warm midday air, tucked the holder into his back pocket, and walked toward the front door without any particular urgency. A bell chimed as he stepped inside. The diner smelled of coffee, griddle grease, and syrup. A waitress in her 30s, her name tag read Brooke, was balancing 3 plates on one arm at the pass. "Just one today, hun," she called out, not really looking. "I'm not here to eat," Elijah said, his voice a low, even baritone that carried without effort. He drew the leather holder from his pocket and let it fall open, holding it at a comfortable, unhurried height. Elijah Carter, County Environmental Health. I'm here to conduct a routine inspection. Can you point me to the person in charge? Brooke's eyes flicked to the badge, then to his face, and a flicker of unease crossed her expression. The specific unease of an employee who knows exactly which parts of the kitchen she does not want a health inspector to see. That'd be Dale, the owner. She glanced toward the back. He's in his office. Hang on, let me just drop these. She hustled off to a booth with her plates, promising over her shoulder that she'd grab him. Elijah nodded and did what he always did. He didn't wait to be escorted. Under the law, a routine inspection of an operating food establishment did not require permission, and the most honest look at any kitchen was the one taken before the owner had a chance to stage it. He tucked the holder back into his pocket, woke his tablet, and started toward the kitchen. The kitchen was loud and hot. A flat-top griddle hissed under a row of burger patties. A young cook worked the line, and a dish machine rumbled in the corner. Elijah stepped just inside the swinging door, out of the traffic path, and began where he always began. Not with the dramatic stuff, but with the quiet fundamentals that tell you everything about how a place is really run. He glanced at the hand-washing sink nearest the line. There was a cutting board leaned across it and a gray bus tub sitting in the basin, both signs that the sink wasn't being used for what it was for. He made a small, neutral note on his tablet. He checked the sanitizer bucket tucked under the prep counter and dipped a test strip. The reading came back weak, almost spent. Another quiet note. He wasn't angry. He wasn't anything. He was simply recording what was in front of him, the way he had 10,000 times before. None of this was personal. To Elijah, an inspection was never an accusation. It was a photograph of a moment in time, and his only job was to make the photograph accurate. 60 feet away behind a scratched metal desk in a cramped back office, Dale Foster looked up at a small security monitor mounted in the corner and saw a stranger standing in his kitchen. Dale Foster was 50 years old, thick through the shoulders and gone soft in the middle, with a florid face and the permanent half-scowl of a man who believed the whole world was trying to take something from him. He had owned Foster's Family Diner for 11 years. He ran it lean, cheap labor, delayed repairs, corners quietly cut wherever a customer wouldn't notice. In Dale's mind, that wasn't cheating. That was business. He squinted at the grainy monitor. A large black man in a plain polo and work pants, standing near his prep line, holding some kind of tablet, looking at his sinks. Dale did not think. That might be the health inspector Brooke mentioned. Dale did not think, I should go find out who that is. In the half-second his eyes landed on the screen, his mind had already written the whole story. And it was a story about a threat, a drifter, a scammer casing the register, one of those guys who wanders into the back claiming he's with the county to shake down a small business owner for a payoff. Some hustler in street clothes who did not, in Dale's gut estimation, belong anywhere near his kitchen. Every assumption Dale made in that half-second was about the man's clothes and the color of his skin, and not one of them was about the badge the man had shown at the front door 2 minutes earlier. Dale shoved back from his desk hard enough to roll the chair into the wall. He came around the corner and through the swinging door into the kitchen, with his chest already out and his jaw already set. Hey! Hey! He barked, jabbing a finger toward Elijah across the line. What do you think you're doing back here? This is a private kitchen, employees only. Elijah did not flinch at the volume. He finished the note he was typing, lowered the tablet to his side, and turned to face the owner with an even, open expression. Mr. Foster, he asked calmly. I'm Elijah Carter with the County Environmental Health Division. I showed my identification to your server at the front. I'm conducting a routine inspection. He began to reach, unhurried, toward his back pocket. Let me show you my credentials. I don't care who you say you are, Dale snapped, taking a step closer and planting himself between Elijah and the line, as if to physically block him. You don't just walk into my kitchen. You want to inspect something, you make an appointment, you go through corporate, you do it the right way. You don't come in dressed like that and start snooping around my registers." "Sir, health inspections are unannounced by law," Elijah replied, his tone never rising. "That's the entire point of them. I'm not near your register. I'm at your hand sink and your prep line, and I'd ask you not to touch anything or move anything while I work." He kept his hand near his back pocket. "Now, please look at my identification, and this will go a lot smoother for both of us." For one brief second, it could all have ended right there. All Dale Foster had to do was look at the badge. He didn't. Instead, Dale waved a dismissive hand at the leather holder, refusing to even glance at it. "I don't need to see some card you printed off the internet," he said. "I know a shakedown when I see one." Elijah looked at him for a long, steady moment. Then he did something Dale did not expect. He simply nodded, turned back to the line, and kept working. Because whatever Dale Foster chose to believe, the inspection was legally underway the moment Elijah stepped inside, and Elijah was not going to let a loud man's temper stop him from doing the job that had brought him there. And now the audience needs to understand something that Dale Foster, in all his bluster, had completely forgotten to be afraid of. Because while Dale was busy deciding that the calm man in the polo was a con artist, that calm man was quietly documenting a series of violations, serious enough to close Foster's family diner that very afternoon. Elijah crossed to the reach-in refrigerator beside the line first. He opened the door, unclipped the probe thermometer from his pocket, and slid the stainless tip into a plastic tub of sliced chicken breast sitting on the top shelf. He watched the digital readout climb and settle. 51 degrees. Cold food is required to be held at or below 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Above that, in what food safety professionals call the temperature danger zone, bacteria multiply fast. 51 degrees on cooked chicken was not a paperwork problem. It was the kind of number that put people in the hospital. Elijah's expression did not change. He photographed the readout with the tablet, logged the temperature, and moved on. He pushed through a heavy insulated door into the walk-in cooler at the back. The moment he stepped inside, he knew. A walk-in that's working right hits you with a wall of cold. This one was merely cool, almost mild. He looked up at the wall-mounted thermometer above the shelving. The needle sat just past 55 degrees. He pressed the back of his hand to the vent. The air moving out of it was weak and lukewarm. The compressor was failing, or it had been turned down to save on the electric bill, and either way the entire cooler, shelves of raw meat, dairy, cut produce, gallons of sauce, was sitting at a temperature where none of it was safe. He worked methodically. Probe into the ground beef, 54. Probe into a tub of potato salad, 56. Each reading photographed, each one logged with a timestamp. On the bottom shelf, he found trays of raw chicken stored directly above a pan of ready-to-eat sliced tomatoes and shredded lettuce. Pink juice beaded on the plastic wrap, inches above food that would go straight onto a customer's plate with no further cooking. Cross-contamination waiting to happen. Then, in the corner where the walk-in met the dry storage shelving, his eyes caught the small, dark telltale scattering along the baseboard. He crouched, took out a small flashlight, and confirmed it. Rodent droppings, fresh ones, tracked along the wall behind sacks of flour and cases of canned goods, with gnaw marks visible on the lower corner of one paper sack. Elijah stood slowly, his knees popping, and looked around the cool, dim room. He was not shocked. In 30 years, he had seen worse. But he had seen enough to know exactly where this was heading. A failing walk-in holding every perishable in the building, 15 degrees into the danger zone. Raw poultry over ready-to-eat food. Active rodent activity in dry storage. A hand sink blocked from use. Sanitizer too weak to sanitize anything. Any one of the temperature findings alone was a critical violation. Together, they added up to something with a specific name in his line of work. An imminent health hazard, and an imminent health hazard did not get a warning and a recheck in 2 weeks. It got the establishment closed on the spot that same day until every hazard was corrected and verified. Elijah typed a few final words into the summary field on his tablet, his thumbs moving with unhurried certainty. He had walked into Foster's Family Diner 90 seconds ago as a routine stop on a Tuesday. He now had, fully documented and time-stamped in his hand, more than enough to padlock the front door before the dinner shift. He slid the tablet back to his side, pushed open the insulated door, and stepped out of the walk-in. Dale Foster was waiting for him in the middle of the kitchen, red-faced, phone already in his hand, and this time he was not going to just talk. "You're done," Dale said, pointing the phone at Elijah like a weapon. "You hear me? You're done snooping. I want you out of my building right now, or I'm calling the cops." "Mr. Foster," Elijah said, and for the first time, there was a note of weight beneath the calm, the weight of a man who was about to deliver very bad news to someone too angry to hear it. "I need you to listen carefully, because this is important. I've documented several critical violations in your kitchen, including refrigeration holding food well above the safe temperature. As the health authority for this county, I'm going to have to suspend your permit and close this establishment until those hazards are corrected. That's not a threat. That's the situation. Now, if you look at my credentials, I'll walk you through exactly what I found and what you need to do." For a moment, the words seemed to bounce right off Dale. Suspend your permit. Close this establishment. To a rational owner, that sentence should have been a bucket of ice water. It should have stopped him cold and made him finally, desperately, look at the badge. But Dale Foster did not hear a health inspector explaining a closure. Dale heard a con man in street clothes threatening his livelihood, and every ounce of his considerable ego rose up to reject it. "Close my... Who the hell do you think you are?" Dale's voice climbed to a near shout, loud enough that the cook on the line went still and the dish machine seemed to hush. "You come into my diner, dressed like you slept in your car, and you're gonna tell me you're shutting me down? We don't do handouts here, pal, and we sure as hell don't do shakedowns. Get out of my kitchen." Elijah didn't move toward the door. He calmly lifted his tablet and made a new entry, speaking the words aloud as he typed them, evenly for the record. 11:26 a.m. Person in charge, Dale Foster, has refused to review inspector credentials and is actively obstructing a health inspection in progress. That composure, that quiet refusal to be rattled, was the thing Dale could not stand. He lifted the phone, jabbed at the screen, and put it to his ear, his eyes locked on Elijah with a spiteful triumph. "Yeah, I need police at Foster's Family Diner, 2200 block of Market," he said into the phone, his voice shifting instantly into the wounded, urgent register of a victim. "I've got a guy who won't leave. Big guy, came into my kitchen off the street. He's harassing my staff. He's messing with my equipment, and he's refusing to get out. No, I don't know him. He's making threats. I've got customers. I've got families in here. I need somebody now." And there it was. The lie, spoken with total confidence into a recorded emergency line. Not a word about a health inspection. Not a word about the badge he'd refused to look at. Just a big man off the street, harassing, threatening, refusing to leave. Dale hung up and lowered the phone with a smug little exhale, absolutely certain that the machinery of the police was now on his side, coming to remove his problem. He had no idea he had just called the police to eyewitness his own diner being shut down for endangering the public. He had no idea that every word he'd just spoken was about to become evidence. If you're already shaking your head at this man, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. Because what happens when that officer pulls into the parking lot is the part you're going to want to see all the way through. Over at the dish pit, a 19-year-old named Jordan Reed had stopped scraping plates and was watching the whole thing with a growing knot in his stomach. Jordan had worked at Foster's for 8 months. It was his first real job, cash he needed for community college classes and to help his mom with rent. He was quiet, careful, and he noticed things. And Jordan knew something the customers didn't. He knew the hand sink on the line had been broken for weeks, the hot water valve seized shut. And he knew it because when he had told Dale about it, Dale had waved him off and said, and Jordan remembered the exact words, "It works fine. Don't go making it a thing. You want to keep getting a paycheck, you keep your mouth shut about the little stuff. Jordan had kept his mouth shut. He'd needed the paycheck, but he had watched the calm man in the navy polo check that exact sink and check the walk-in and write, and something in Jordan had gone cold because he understood before anyone else in that kitchen did that the man was not a scammer. The man was the real thing, and the man was right. Now Jordan watched his boss lie to the police loudly about a county official just doing his job, and he felt the fear every young worker feels. The fear of the boss, the fear of the paycheck, the fear of being the one who speaks up. He looked at the calm man being screamed at, and he looked at Brooke. Brooke had drifted back toward the pass, order pad forgotten, her phone already sliding out of her apron pocket. She had heard the man show his badge at the door. She knew Dale was lying, and quietly, holding the phone low against her hip so Dale couldn't see, she tilted the lens toward the kitchen and pressed record. 2 minutes later, a patrol cruiser rolled into the parking lot. Officer Ryan Keller was 28 years old, 3 years on the force, with a fresh haircut and the restless energy of a young cop who found patrol boring and arrests exciting. When the call came over, disturbance, male refusing to leave a business, possible threats, he was 2 blocks away and glad to have something to do. He came through the front door of the diner with his thumbs hooked in his duty belt and his chin up, scanning the room. Dale Foster was on him before he'd taken 3 steps, hustling out from behind the register with his hand out. "Officer, thank God. He's in the back, in my kitchen," Dale said, low and fast, pouring the story into Keller's ear before the officer could form a single independent impression. "Big guy, won't leave, came in off the street and started messing with my equipment, making threats about shutting me down, scaring my staff half to death. I've asked him nice 5 times. He won't go." And this is where a different officer might have paused, might have asked a question or two, might have noticed that the big guy scaring everyone was standing calmly by the prep line holding a tablet, not yelling, not moving, not doing anything but waiting. But Officer Keller did not pause. He took Dale's story whole, the way Dale had taken one look at Elijah and decided he was a threat. The owner was the owner. The man in the kitchen was the problem. The script was already written. Keller walked back through the swinging door with his jaw set and his voice already loud. "Sir, I need you to put that down and step away from the counter," he ordered, pointing at Elijah's tablet. "Right now." Elijah turned to face him slowly, keeping both hands visible, the tablet held loosely at his side. "Officer Good, I'm glad you're here," he said, his baritone as steady as ever. "My name is Elijah Carter. I'm the director of the County Health Division, and I'm in the middle of an inspection. The owner is refusing to look at my credentials. They're in my back right pocket. I'm going to reach for them slowly so you can verify who I am." "I didn't ask who you are," Keller cut him off. "I asked you to put the tablet down and step away. This is the owner's property, and he wants you gone." "I understand," Elijah said, unruffled, "and I will happily explain everything outside. But I need you to look at my identification first, because this is a legal inspection and the situation is not what this man told you. Please, just look at the badge." He moved his right hand toward his back pocket, slow, deliberate, exactly the way a lifetime of walking into other people's spaces had taught him to move. His fingers found the leather holder and drew it out, extending it toward Keller, so the laminated county card and the small shield faced the light. Keller didn't look at it. Instead, reading the movement of a hand toward a pocket as defiance, as a threat, as one more thing not to tolerate, the young officer stepped in fast and knocked Elijah's arm aside with a sharp swat of his forearm. The leather holder flew from Elijah's fingers, spun through the air, and skittered across the floor, sliding to a stop underneath a stainless steel prep table, deep in the shadow beneath it, out of sight. "Hands behind your back!" Keller barked. Elijah did not resist. He did not tense or twist or argue. He had known men like this for 54 years, and he knew with absolute clarity that the fight was not here, in this kitchen, with this angry young man and his handcuffs. The fight would be won later, on the record, with the truth. So, he let his tablet be taken from his hand and set on the counter. He brought his arms behind his back without being forced. He let it happen. The cold steel ratcheted around his left wrist, then his right, clicking tight, tighter than they needed to be, tight enough that the metal bit into the skin and the tendon. Keller ran a rough pat-down along his waistband, breathing hard through his nose. "He's under arrest for trespassing and obstruction," Keller announced to the kitchen, to Dale, to no one in particular, his voice pitched for the small camera on his own chest. "You don't get to refuse to leave when the property owner tells you to go." From the dish pit, Jordan Reed opened his mouth. He wanted to say it. "That's the health inspector. He showed his badge. Dale's lying." The words were right there. But Dale's eyes cut to him, hard and warning, and the fear of the paycheck closed Jordan's throat. And the moment passed. Jordan looked down at the plate, sick with himself, and said nothing. Elijah, cuffed now, turned his head slightly and spoke toward the blinking camera on the officer's chest, his voice never rising above that low, level calm. "For the record," he said, "I am Elijah Carter, Director of the County Environmental Health Division. My credentials are on the floor under that prep table where you just knocked them. You are placing a county health official under arrest, on camera, in the middle of a lawful inspection that has already documented an imminent health hazard in this kitchen. I am not resisting. I am asking you one more time to retrieve my identification and read it." Yeah, save it," Keller said, gripping Elijah by the bicep and turning him toward the door. "Walk. Now, do me a favor before this next part. If you believe this man is about to be proven completely right, hit like and subscribe so more people see how it ends." And so, the officer walked him out. He steered Elijah out of the kitchen, through the swinging door, and into the packed dining room, one hand clamped on the back of that plain navy polo. And the whole diner went still. The construction crews, the retirees, the young mothers, the toddler in the high chair, every face turned to watch a calm, dignified, silver-bearded man be marched out in handcuffs like a criminal, past table after table, the length of the entire room. Elijah did not lower his head. He did not perform his innocence or beg for a witness. He simply kept his eyes forward and his spine straight and walked at the pace the officer set, carrying more dignity in handcuffs than every other man in that building was carrying free. Behind the register, Dale Foster crossed his arms and smirked. Outside, the midday sun was bright on the cracked asphalt. Keller walked Elijah toward the patrol cruiser and leaned him against the rear fender to wait while he sorted out the paperwork. And it was right then, as Keller reached for his radio, that a second vehicle turned into the lot, a supervisor's SUV, its light bar dark, rolling to a stop beside the cruiser. Sergeant Dan Whitfield climbed out. He was in his mid-40s, a lean, weathered veteran with 20 years on the job, and none of the young officer's hunger for action. He had been half a mile away when he heard one of his rookies calling in a disturbance-turned-arrest at a diner, and long experience had taught him that arrests made in the first 90 seconds of a call were the ones that came back to bite the department. So, he had swung by, just to look. He took in the scene with a slow, practiced sweep. A cuffed man in a plain polo standing calm and straight against the cruiser. Too calm, in Whitfield's experience, for a man who'd actually done something. His young officer, flushed and keyed up. And through the diner's front window, the owner, arms crossed, watching with the smug look of a man enjoying a show. "Keller," Whitfield said evenly. "Walk me through it." "Trespassing and obstruction, Sarge," Keller said quickly. "Owner called it in. Guy came in off the street into the kitchen, wouldn't leave, was messing with the equipment, making threats. Refused my orders, I secured him." Whitfield nodded slowly, then turned to the cuffed man because in 20 years he had learned that the quietest person on the scene was usually the one worth listening to. "And what's your version, sir?" Elijah met his eyes. "My name is Elijah Carter. I'm the director of the County Environmental Health Division. I was conducting a lawful, unannounced inspection of that kitchen. I documented critical violations, a walk-in cooler holding food at 55 degrees, Raw poultry over ready-to-eat food, rodent activity. When I identified myself, the owner refused to look at my credentials and called the police. Your officer arrived, refused to look at my credentials, knocked them out of my hand, and arrested me. My identification is on the floor of that kitchen right now, under the steel prep table where it landed. Everything I'm telling you is on his body camera and on my tablet, which is sitting on the kitchen counter. He paused. You can end this in 30 seconds. Send someone to read my badge. For a moment, nobody moved. Keller scoffed. Sarge, he's been saying that whole, I'm with the county routine since... Then it costs us nothing to check it, Whitfield said, and the flatness in his voice made Keller go quiet. Whitfield walked into the diner himself. Dale started toward him with his hand out and his story ready. Officer, thank you, that man was... But Whitfield lifted a single finger without breaking stride, and something in his face made Dale's mouth close. The sergeant pushed through the swinging door into the kitchen, crouched down at the stainless prep table Elijah had described, and looked into the shadow beneath it. There it was, a worn black leather holder, face down on the tile. Whitfield reached under, picked it up, and stood. He flipped it open. On the left, behind a scratched plastic window, a laminated identification card, a photograph of the calm man now standing in handcuffs in the parking lot, a county seal, and printed in clear official type, a name and a title he could not have misread. Elijah Carter, Director of the Environmental Health Division, County Department of Public Health. Opposite the card, an embossed metal shield, the real thing, the genuine, unmistakable article. Sergeant Dan Whitfield stood very still in the middle of that hot kitchen and felt the floor tilt under 20 years of instinct. He was not looking at a trespasser. He was looking at the credentials of the single most senior public health official in the entire county, the man whose office his own department worked alongside, the man whose name was on the paperwork that closed restaurants and cleared crime scenes. And that man was cuffed against a patrol car outside because a rookie hadn't spent 5 seconds looking at a badge. He did not sigh. He did not curse. He closed the holder, gripped it tight, and walked back out into the sunlight, with his face carefully blank and his stomach dropping. He walked straight past Keller to the rear of the cruiser, took out his handcuff key, and unlocked the steel from Elijah Carter's wrists himself. The cuffs came away to reveal deep red rings pressed into the skin. Mr. Carter, Whitfield said quietly, holding out the leather holder. Your credentials, sir. I am very sorry. Keller's face had gone the color of paper. Sarge, wait, what? He's the county health director, Keller, Whitfield said, without turning around. He showed you his badge. You knocked it out of his hand and cuffed him on camera. He let that sit for one terrible second. Go stand by my vehicle. Don't say anything. Elijah rolled his freed shoulders and rubbed one wrist slowly, working the blood back into his hands. He did not shout in triumph. He did not so much as glance at the young officer. He took his credential holder, slid it into his back pocket, and turned toward the diner where Dale Foster's smirk was, at long last, beginning to curdle into fear. Because now the calm man was free, and now the calm man was going back inside, not as a trespasser this time, but as exactly who he had said he was from the very first minute. Elijah Carter walked back into Foster's family diner the same way he had walked in the first time, unhurried, calm, in no particular rush. But the room felt it now. The customers who had watched him marched out in handcuffs 5 minutes earlier watched him walk back in a free man with a county badge clipped to his belt, and a low murmur ran through the booths. He went straight to the kitchen counter and picked up his tablet, the one Keller had taken from his hand. He pressed the button and woke the screen. There it all was, the temperature log. 51 on the reach-in chicken, 55 in the walk-in, 54 on the ground beef. The photographs of the raw poultry dripping over the tomatoes, the image of the droppings along the dry storage baseboard, the note, time-stamped 11/26, recording that the person in charge had obstructed the inspection, Every reason to close the place, sitting in his hand exactly where he'd left it, patient and undeniable. Dale Foster hovered at the edge of the kitchen now, all his bluster drained out of him, replaced by the dawning, sweating realization of a man who has just understood the size of his mistake. "Look, Mr. Carter, there's been a huge misunderstanding," Dale started, his voice pitched into an oily, desperate friendliness. "I didn't know who you were. If I'd have known, obviously. Look, whatever you saw back there, we can fix it today. We can take care of it right now. No need to—" "Mr. Foster." Elijah did not raise his voice, and he did not have to. The single word cut Dale off completely. "I'm going to explain what happens now, and I need you to listen, because this affects your customers and your staff." He turned the tablet so Dale could see the screen. "Your walk-in cooler is holding every perishable in this building at 55 degrees. Your reach-in is at 51. That is 14 degrees into the range where the bacteria that put people in the hospital multiply fastest. You have raw chicken stored over food that goes out uncooked. You have active rodent activity in your dry storage. And your only hand wash and sink on the line is blocked and, according to what I can see, not supplying hot water." He let each item land. Individually, several of those are critical violations. Together, they are what the health code calls an imminent health hazard. Okay, so a fine, a warning, whatever it is, Dale said. "No," Elijah said. "An imminent health hazard is not a warning. Under the authority of the county health code, I am suspending this establishment's operating permit, effective immediately. Foster's Family Diner is closed as of right now. You will stop all food service, you will not serve another plate, and you will not reopen until every one of these hazards has been corrected and re-inspected, and I have personally signed off on it." The kitchen had gone silent. Even the griddle seemed to have stopped hissing. Elijah lifted his phone and dialed his office, and he spoke clearly, partly to the person on the line and partly deliberately for the room. "This is Carter. I'm at Foster's Family Diner, 2200 Market. I'm issuing an immediate permit suspension, imminent health hazard, failed refrigeration, rodent activity, the works. I need the closure notice generated, and I need our counsel looped in, because there was a police incident here. I'll brief you in 10. He paused, listening. "Yes, full documentation, photos, temps, and body camera footage from the responding officer." He hung up and turned to Sergeant Whitfield, who had followed him back inside and was standing quietly by the door. "Sergeant, I'm going to need your cooperation on the record," Elijah said. "I want a formal preservation order on Officer Keller's body camera footage, his dash camera, and the 911 call this establishment placed. All of it, held and not overwritten. That footage documents both a false arrest of a county official and this owner making false statements to emergency dispatch while obstructing a public health inspection." "You'll have it," Whitfield said. "It's already flagged." Then Elijah turned back to Dale one last time. He did not gloat. If anything, there was something almost tired in his face. The weariness of a man who had done this too many times and knew exactly what it cost. "You had one job this morning, Mr. Foster," he said quietly. "Not to fix the cooler, not even to pass the inspection, just to look at the badge, just to see the man in front of you before you decided what he was." He slid his tablet into its case. "Everything that happens to your business now happened because you decided you already knew." And Dale Foster, standing in the ruins of a Tuesday lunch rush, in an empty-eyed silence where his diner used to be, finally had nothing to say. The closure of a restaurant does not look dramatic. There are no sirens. It is a quiet, procedural, and completely final thing. Within the hour, a second county vehicle arrived, and one of Elijah's inspectors walked in with a clipboard and a stack of forms. Elijah briefed her in low tones by the register, then signed the suspension notice himself, a plain white placard, official county seal at the top, bold black letters across the middle, reading that this establishment is closed by order of the County Department of Public Health. He walked to the front door, peeled the backing from the adhesive strip, and pressed the notice firmly against the inside of the glass, facing out, where every person in the parking lot would see it. Brooke moved quietly through the dining room, apologizing to tables, explaining that the kitchen was closed, that lunch was on the house, that they'd have to pack it up. Customers gathered their things and filed out into the sun, glancing back at the closed sign and at the owner standing rigid behind his register. A family business that had served that strip for 11 years had stopped serving food, permanently for now, in the span of a single Tuesday morning, and it had happened not because of one broken cooler, but because of the choices a man made when he decided he already knew who was standing in his kitchen. Out by the supervisor's SUV, Sergeant Whitfield was taking statements, and it was there that something small and important happened. Jordan Reed took off his apron, folded it once, and walked over to the sergeant. His hands were shaking. He had spent 8 months keeping his mouth shut to protect a paycheck, and he understood that what he was about to say would almost certainly cost him that paycheck. But he had watched a man get dragged out of that diner in handcuffs for telling the truth, and he had stayed silent, and he could not do it a second time. "Sir," Jordan said, "I work here, line and dish. I need to tell you what I saw, and some stuff you should probably write down about that kitchen." Whitfield looked up and clicked his pen. "Go ahead, son. Take your time." Jordan told him about the sink, that the hot water valve had been seized shut for weeks, that he'd reported it to Dale directly, and that Dale had told him it worked fine, and to keep his mouth shut about the little stuff if he wanted to keep getting paid. He told him the walk-in had been running warm for at least a month, that Dale kept saying he'd get to it, that they'd been icing things down by hand on the worst days. He told him the man in the polo had shown a badge at the front door, he'd heard it himself, and that Dale had lied to the police about him. Elijah, standing a few feet away, listened without interrupting, and when Jordan finished, he stepped over. "That took real courage," Elijah said quietly. "What you just described, the owner instructing you to conceal a known hazard, that matters. And so, you understand, son, you're a witness who reported a safety problem to your employer and got told to hide it. There are protections for that. Nobody is going to let this cost you." He handed Jordan a card. "When you're ready, you call my office directly, not the diner, my office." Jordan took the card and nodded, his throat too tight to speak, and Brooke, the waitress, had a card of her own to play. As the sergeant finished with Jordan, she came over holding her phone, and she held it up so both the sergeant and Elijah could see the screen. "I recorded it," she said simply, "from when the officer walked in." You can hear Dale tell him the whole story, the off the street, the making threats, and you can hear this gentleman say his name and say he's the health director and ask him to look at the badge. It's all on here, clear. Sergeant Whitfield looked at the phone, then at Elijah, and something passed between the two older men, the shared weary recognition of two people who had just watched a situation that could have been avoided a dozen times over, avoided by nothing more than one person, at one moment, choosing to look and listen instead of assume. "Send me a copy of that," Whitfield said to Brooke, "and keep the original, don't delete it." Between the body camera, the dash camera, the 911 recording, Brooke's video, Jordan's statement, and Elijah's own time-stamped inspection log, the truth of what had happened at Foster's family diner that morning was now recorded from 6 different directions. There was no version of events left for anyone to invent. There was only what had actually happened, preserved and undeniable, waiting for the people whose job it was to act on it, and those people were about to get very busy. Officer Ryan Keller drove back to the precinct that afternoon, still trying to convince himself it wasn't as bad as it felt. So the guy turned out to be somebody. Fine. He'd been given a story by a business owner, and he'd acted on it. That was the job. He'd write it up clean, the way things get written up, and it would blow over the way things blew over. He did not yet understand that the era of a story blowing over quietly had ended the moment 6 independent recordings captured what he'd actually done. By the time Keller reached the station, the county's legal counsel had already contacted the department. When the director of the county health division is falsely arrested on camera in the middle of a lawful inspection, it does not get handled by a shift sergeant filing a report. It goes up, fast. His body camera footage was pulled and preserved before he'd finished his paperwork. And a lieutenant from the Professional Standards Unit, Internal Affairs, was waiting to review it. They watched it together in a small room. There was no ambiguity to argue over. The footage showed Elijah Carter, calm and cooperative, identifying himself as the county health director. It showed him reaching slowly, announcing the movement, drawing a leather credential holder and extending it. It showed Keller swat it out of his hand without a glance and cuff a man who never once resisted. And the audio captured Elijah in handcuffs, stating for the record exactly who he was and exactly where his badge had landed, while Keller told him to save it. An officer's whole defense in a case like this rests on what he reasonably knew and reasonably feared in the moment. But the camera on Keller's own chest showed that the truth had been offered to him, out loud more than once, and that he had physically refused to look at it. There was no reasonable fear on that tape. There was only a young man who had decided the owner was right and the calm man was a problem, and who had refused every chance to find out he was wrong. Keller was placed on administrative leave that same day, his badge and service weapon logged into evidence pending the outcome of the investigation. He reached out to the union, expecting the reflexive, protective machinery that usually surrounded an officer in trouble. But the union representative watched the footage too, and the conversation was short and cold. There are cases a union fights to the wall, and there are cases where the footage is so clean that fighting only spreads the damage. A false arrest of the county's top health official, captured from 6 angles, was the second kind. He was quietly on his own. The county did not stop at the department's internal process. Its counsel filed a formal civil rights complaint over the unlawful detention of a public official carrying out his statutory duties, and put the city on notice to preserve every record connected to the incident. This was the part that would ultimately cost the most. Not a criminal trial with handcuffs in a cell, but the slow, grinding, expensive machinery of civil liability, the kind that ends careers and empties municipal insurance funds without a single dramatic courtroom moment. A settlement, when it came, would be measured in 6 figures, and every dollar of it would trace back to 5 seconds in a diner kitchen when an officer chose not to look at a badge. Within weeks, the Professional Standards Review was complete, and its findings were not survivable. Unlawful arrest, failure to verify readily available identification, use of force to disarm a compliant subject of his own credentials. Ryan Keller was terminated from the department. At 28, 3 years into the career he'd found so boring he went looking for excitement. He was out of it. And because the termination was for cause and thoroughly documented, the odds of ever wearing a badge in another department again were slim to none. He had wanted something to do that morning. He had found it, and it had cost him everything. Here's a question worth sitting with, and I genuinely like your answer in the comments. How many times does the difference between a normal Tuesday and a destroyed career come down to a single choice to slow down, look, and listen? And why is that choice so hard for the people who need to make it most? Drop your thoughts below, and if this story's holding you, hit like and subscribe so it reaches the people who need to see it. Dale Foster's reckoning did not arrive as a single blow. It arrived the way a building comes down, one failure at a time until there is nothing left to stand on. The permit suspension held. To reopen, Dale had to replace the failed walk-in compressor, repair the hand sink, pass a full pest control remediation, discard thousands of dollars of spoiled inventory, and pass a complete re-inspection. That alone would have been a brutal, expensive month for a lean operation with thin margins. But it was only the beginning, because a health closure is public. The county posted the inspection results to its online database the same week. The temperatures, the rodent activity, the raw poultry over ready-to-eat food, all of it permanently searchable next to the name Foster's Family Diner. Ann Brooks' video, the one that captured Dale lying to a police officer about a county official, made its way online too, the way these things do now. The comment sections did the rest. Regulars who had eaten there for years read the words 55 degrees and rodent activity, and quietly decided they'd take their families somewhere else. There was also the matter of the false report. Dale had told a 911 dispatcher in a recorded call that a man was off the street, making threats, and harassing his staff, none of which was true, all of which was designed to get the police to remove a lawful inspector. He was cited for obstruction of a health officer, and the recording of that call became one more piece of a record that no lawyer could spin. Dale did eventually make the repairs. He did eventually pass a re-inspection and reopen the doors, but the diner that reopened was a ghost of the one that closed. The lunch rush never came back. The booths that had been full the Tuesday sat empty week after week. A family business that had survived 11 years, on trust, lost that trust in a single morning, and trust, once a whole town has watched you lie to a police officer and endanger their kids' lunches, does not come back with a coat of paint. Before the year was out, Dale Foster quietly put the building up for sale and walked away from the diner that carried his name, undone in the end, not by a broken cooler, but by the one thing he refused to do, which was look at the man in front of him. Jordan Reed never went back to work at Foster's. He didn't need to. Elijah's office was true to its word. Jordan's account made him a protected witness, not a casualty. And one of the inspectors, impressed by the careful, honest young man who'd found his courage at exactly the right moment, helped him land a job in the kitchen of the county hospital. Better pay, real benefits, a place that did things right. He kept Elijah's card in his wallet. As for Elijah Carter, the following Tuesday found him exactly where you'd expect, in a plain polo and worn boots, thermometer clipped to his pocket, walking unannounced into another kitchen somewhere in the county, quiet and unhurried, ready to take an honest photograph of a moment in time. He never told the story at work. He didn't need people to know. For a man who had spent 30 years walking into rooms where he wasn't expected, the arrest at Foster's was not the remarkable part. The remarkable part was the same thing it had always been, that a badge and a calm voice and the plain truth, recorded and preserved, could still outlast a loud man's certainty about who did and didn't belong. And that's really the whole thing, isn't it? Not one of the disasters in this story had to happen. Dale didn't have to lie. The officer didn't have to cuff him. All either of them had to do, at any point, was stop for 5 seconds and actually look at the person standing in front of them, instead of the story they had already written in their heads about what that person was. A cheap polo instead of a suit, a plain face instead of a familiar one. That was all the evidence either man needed to decide a county director was a threat, and it cost one of them his business and the other his badge. So, let me ask you directly, because I read every comment. Have you ever been looked at and instantly written off, decided about, before you ever opened your mouth? And on the other side of it, how often do we do the exact same thing to someone else without even noticing? Tell me about it below. I mean it. That conversation is the reason these stories matter. If this one moved you, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so the next story finds you. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.